Blender for Noobs.
Hello and welcome to part 4 of Secrets of Blender modeling the Berkey spacecraft. In this part of the tutorial we're going to be looking at doing the basic modeling on the hull. So if you haven't already, go ahead and save your blend file as version 4. And the next thing I want to do is I want to move these the backdrop and the lamp to a different layer just to get it out of the way. So I'm going to select the backdrop, shift select the layer, the lamp, choose M, and just move it to, I'm going to move it down to this bottom layer here, and that way it'll be out of the way and we'll retrieve that layer when we go to do our renders. The other thing I want to move right now are the solar panels, so I'm just going to select that, and I could just H to hide, but I think for now I'm just going to move them to a different layer. So I'm going to move them over to this layer here. And while I'm at it, why don't I go ahead and I'm going to move the camera over to the lighting layer, so it'll be out of the way as well. And I actually have a sun in there that I don't need, so I'm just going to X delete that. Okay, so this is the basic hull. So now we can start with our modeling process. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to select the hull, and I am going to come over to my modifiers, add a modifier, and I'm going to add the subdivision surface. Now normally you probably wouldn't add the subdivision surface right off the bat like this, but looking at this object, I mean, it looks to me, like I said before, sort of like a fuselage of a plane or maybe a jet engine kind of shape to it. So I really need to get this curve into it. So I'm going to bump this up to 2, and we can go ahead and hit our T for Tools menu and Smooth. And I'm going to tab into Edit Mode. And I'm going to do a Control R and select off of that. And I'm just going to S scale it up. Something like right there. Alt select this one. And Shift Alt select this one here. And I want to scale these up, but I don't want to scale them along the Y. Now the way that you can do that is when you choose S to scale, do a Shift Y, and that will keep it from scaling along the Y. It will only scale along the X and Z. Let's scale these up a little bit. And probably need to look at my side view to see how this looks here. And I think what I'm going to do is, instead of this one edge loop, I'm going to put 2 edge loops. So I'm just going to Alt select this edge loop, this one right here, and choose X and delete edge loop. And just do a Control R. Roll up on the mouse button or mouse wheel and select twice off of that so they're deselected. And let's scale them out a little bit along the Y, SY, bring them out just a little bit, and just S to scale them up. Okay, so now if we look at the side view, we really have kind of a fuselage kind of thing going. And in fact, when I look at this, maybe it's a little bit too squatty. Maybe want this whole thing to be a little bit longer. So I'm going to SY and just scale it out just a little bit like that. And go ahead and bring in my solar panels just to have a look at them. And as you can see now, they probably are going to need to be a little bit wider, SY, to match the size of the ship itself. Okay, and let's go ahead and just turn off that layer. Just select our first layer there. Okay, so the first part that I'm going to concentrate on is this first section. So select this, tab into Edit Mode here, and let's 3 into Side View. Select Faces and just B box select this whole piece here. If you're not getting all of around the entire piece, you might have Occlude turned on, so you want to make sure that's turned off so it'll select the faces behind it as well. And I'm just going to choose P to separate this part, and just separate by selection. And while we're at it, I'm just going to B box select the end here, P, separate by selection, same thing, and then tab back into object mode. I'm going to select this one here, come up to my outliner, and rename this, control click in there, rename it hull _ front, and select this one and name this hull underscore rear. And as you might guess, hull underscore center. Now, the reason that I'm naming these parts here is really it's a good modeling practice to make sure that your parts are named. As we go along, I'm going to forget to name all these. What I usually do on my models is at the very end of my modeling process, or pretty close to the end, I'll go back through my outliner and make sure all my parts are named and nicely arranged there. Because if you ever sell your models or you share them with somebody else and they go in and maybe they want to modify something or see what a part is, then it's very frustrating for them to go in there and just see something named cube or something named circle or cone or whatever your basic primitive names are. If they have meaningful names, then it makes more sense. When they see all the holes together, they can shift select them all and they know they have that entire piece there. Just good modeling practices. Okay, so why did I separate these into 3 sections? Why didn't I just leave, for example, the front and the center the same? Well, here's the reasoning. When I look at this, I see that we have these lines here, this geometry that I'm going to kind of recreate. We don't want to create that and have it propagate along the entire hull. Now, even if we only extruded along the front and just had the edges go along the hull, it still means that you're dividing all this geometry even more than it already is with the subsurface. Another good thing to keep in mind when you're modeling is you do not have to keep your model all one big piece. That is a beginner's mistake, a mistake that I made for a long time. I don't know where that really comes from, and I know other people have done it as well, is when you're modeling, you have this feeling that you have to have all of this connected. It's got to be physically connected as far as the mesh goes. But that's simply not true. It's actually going to help your modeling process to break up your model into logical pieces. And there was even a fear on my part, like if I created a model and I had it in all different sections, when somebody got the model and they opened it up, they would, move something by mistake and they would get it all messed up. And I'm thinking, if it was all one piece, then it'd be intact and it wouldn't have any problem with it. But really, that's a silly idea, because when you think about it, if they download the model, it's all in one piece. If they mess it up, they can download it again or get it out of their original file, whatever. I mean, it makes absolutely no sense whatsoever to try to keep a model, especially a complex model like this is going to be, in one piece. And again, it's going to help our poly count as far as the number of faces we have to break this up as well. We don't want all this geometry propagating over the entire model. So for the front section, I'm going to tab in edit mode. And like I said before, I think these lines just go along the top here, but I'm actually going to do them along the entire ring. So I'm just going to alt select these faces, and I'm going to change my pivot point down here to be individual origins. T in my tool menu, and I'm going to extrude individual. And as soon as you hit that, just hit it twice. That way, if you only hit it once, I'll show you what happens. You'll probably find out if you try to do it, but if I just hit it and then move my mouse, you'll see you already are extruding, and we don't want to do that. So once you have it extruded, then since we have this on individual origins, I can do a S scale, and it's just going to scale those individual faces. So scale those down a bit like that. Actually, we want to get basically looking at the thickness here in the middle is what I'm looking at. Okay, and I'm going to extrude again, but I want to go back down here and change this to median point. So E extrude, click off of that, and S scale. So really just scaling inward. Not too far, but a little way in there. And we're left with something like this. So what we need to do to kind of sharpen this up, I'm just going to do a Control R, and create an edge loop. And we can just bring this out like this. We don't want to bump it up completely up against the other edge loop there, but we want to get pretty close. Do another Control R, same thing, but we're going to go down this way, pretty close there, and tab out of that, and it looks something like this. And as I always recommend, do a Control S save, just to save and save often. So then I want to look at the center part of the hole here, and this is kind of interesting the way this is done. As I was mentioning in the intro, we have these pieces that seem to be like part of the outer hull, almost like they're broken apart. Very interesting. We're going to do something like that, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to have basically an inner hull and an outer hull. And the inner hull is going to have like a lot of the detailing that we put on there. And this outer hull is going to be these broken pieces. So we need two parts here. So with the outer hull selected, I'm just going to do a Shift D to duplicate and select off of that. And I'm just going to S. Actually, I don't want it to scale along the Y, so I'm going to do a S Shift Y to scale it down just a little bit, just to get it out of the way. And then this piece is our outer hull, and we can change the name if we need to. So what I want to do with this outer hull is I want to create some of these pieces that are sitting here. So the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to go ahead and apply the subsurf on the outer hull. Because right now, if we look at it, there's not too many faces there that we can deal with, that we can see anyway. So I'm going to go ahead and apply it, and when we tab into object mode, we see all the extra faces there. So now, basically like a jigsaw puzzle, I'm going to start cutting pieces out of this hull. And to do that, I'm going to come down here, I'm going to turn on Extrude so I don't select the faces on the other side of the object. And I'm going to turn on faces. And I'm going to choose 7 top view just so I kind of know where I'm at. And in my imagination, or my mind on this thing, this back top is mostly complete, so I'm going to assume probably the bottom is too. So I'm going to leave those mostly intact and then create these other little pieces here. So I'm going to use the C tool to select these. Just hit C and move your mouse wheel up and down if you need to change the selection radius. And I'm just going to start selecting along here. And actually, I think I want to leave more of a gap here at the end. Maybe another set of faces there. Because again, I picture this break here like over here, where it seems to be kind of a break between the front and the middle hole and the rear there. Okay, I'm going to do a little bit of the same over here on the front, except I'm not going to make it quite as long. Maybe a little bit more broken up like this. And actually, maybe we can imagine it just bridges to the back hole there, or the back part. Okay, right click off of that. And we have a couple small pieces here. And then I'm going to do a Control 7 to look at the very bottom and kind of do something similar to what I did on the top. I'm going to leave most of the hole here. something like that, and do a Control 3 on the numpad. And let's create some more of these kind of pieces that are kind of floating out there. Something like that. Okay, with all those selected, I'm just going to choose P and separate them by selection. And then tab back into object mode, select the other pieces. Make sure I got the right one here. Okay, and just X delete. So what that leaves us with really is these pieces that are going to be these kind of pieces that are part of the hull that are sticking out. And then the idea, or at least the idea that I have, is this inner hull is going to end up with a bunch of detailing on the inside that will show through these and actually be, you know, I guess you could consider it more like the working part of the hull. So right now this hull is like infinitely thin, and we definitely need some thickness to it. So I'm just going to go to the modifiers, add modifier, and just add a solidify modifier to it. And if we change the thickness, we zoom in here and look at it, we can actually change the thickness to whatever we think it should be. I don't think it should be too thick, but just enough to show that there is some kind of thickness there. We also want to add another modifier and add the edge split modifier, and that'll just give it some definition. And I'm just going to save that real quick. Okay, the next thing that we need to do is, you'll notice that these pieces are very jagged. I mean, they look like sort of like puzzle pieces, or I don't know, it looks sort of robotic to me, and I don't want that robotic look. I want more of like a smooth kind of look that we have here. So I'm going to tab into edit mode, choose vertices, and I'm just going to start editing these vertices a little bit so that they look, for lack of a better word, more smooth flowing. So I'm just going to come in here and select a vertex, and I'm just going to move it along its axis. For example, I can do this and that, but if I do that, you'll notice that it won't be on the same plane as what it was. We'd have to adjust it. So the way we're going to do this, let me Control Z undo, is there's a few different ways you can do this. You can do a Shift V, and when you do that, you'll notice that it allows you to move along different axes. But there's an easier way to do this, and this is probably one of the biggest secrets that I can tell you in Blender. You don't see this hardly anywhere. It's probably in the manual somewhere. I haven't seen it, but somewhere along the line I picked it up, and it is just an immense help in Blender. And that is GG, the GG key. So you hit GG and it will move along the axis that you want it to move along. Now this is the same for vertices, it's the same for edges, edge loops. I mean, it works no matter what. So it's really a really handy tool. Now unfortunately there's no edge here, so I can't really move this way, but at least it allows me to move along that plane. So we keep the same depth that we had before. Same thing for this one, just GG it, and I'm just going to move these kind of where I think I want them to be. And I know that to some that probably seems like a silly secret, but as you work with different models, you will find that that tool is just an amazing tool to use, or an amazing function to use. Okay, so you can kind of see what I'm doing here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to speed this part of the section up a little bit, just so you don't have to sit through me clicking on every single vertex that I'm clicking on here. But the idea is we just want to get this less of a hard-edged look and more of a almost more of a smooth look. In fact, we could add the subsurf again, but I really don't want it that smooth. I do want some edges to show up here. Okay, so tab back in object mode, and we have something that looks sort of like this. Not quite as puzzly looking, but broken apart like we want it. And again, this part in here is our interior part of the hull. So now what I'm going to do is come back to the front part of the hull here, tab in edit mode, and just going to alt select this ring of vertices here and do an E extrude, scale inward a little bit, and basically what I want to do is give this some thickness. We could solidify this, but if we do that, we are actually going to duplicate all of this geometry. Not needed. So all we're going to do is just create this extrusion, extrude it again, E extrude, scale it inward. And we can go to our 3 view and then Z into our wireframe mode to see where we're at, and just scale it up, and Z back into our view here. We just want to make sure that we're not going to come out through this inner hole. And actually this inner hole will probably end up being a little bit bigger to get closer to the outer hole, but for right now we'll just leave this as it is because we're going to be doing something in here anyway. Don't know quite yet what it's going to be, because if we look at this, we have no clue what is in there. We know there's something in there. Looks mechanical, looks mysterious, interesting. So we'll do something like that. But right now we'll leave it like it is. Tab back into object mode. Same thing on the rear hull. Tab in edit mode. Select these vertices. Do an E extrude. Scale down. Like I said, may do some kind of like a rocket end type of situation here, or may actually do something completely different. I don't know until I get there, which is part of the fun of modeling. So E extrude and scale inward, and just S to scale out, not too much. And we'll leave that as it is right now. Tab back out of that. Okay, so that's the basic hull modeling. And in the next section, what we're going to do is we're actually going to be looking at this interior part of the hull and start putting some details on there. So already in section 5, we're going to be getting into more of a detailing type of situation. But before we leave this part, let's go ahead and do a render of our progression. So I'm just going to shift select our lights here and the camera, or actually the solar panels, and do an F12. And there's our render. So already for me, it's looking kind of interesting. I mean, we got a long way to go, but you can see the possibilities hopefully starting to emerge here. So I'm going to save this image, and I'll see you in part 5.